My name's Rachel Murphy. My background, so I've built and sold a couple of companies, and I sold the last one in 2020. And in and amongst that, I probably did 20 years, maybe slightly more, on the consultancy side. I've had a raft of different job titles over the years, many of them beginning with C. Actually, I've had a few nicknames beginning with C as well. But anyway, we'll move along. So I've done that Chief Information Officer, Chief Digital Officer role, public and private sector. And I knew really early on that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But I kind of knew after I'd built the first business, so we go back 20, 25 years, I was project managing and I implemented the first web-based piece of software for the social care market in the UK. And I built a business pretty rapidly around that. And I remember pitching that to the chap who actually owned the software business. And I said, you really need to get some professional services around the business. And he was only interested in the recurring revenue from the software. And I was probably early 20s. And I said to him, if you don't mind, I'm going to spin up an offer. And I think he thought, good luck with that. That won't be going anywhere fast. And fast forward, first year, we wrote $1 million in way of turnover. And it was it really was a heavy contractor business, and we just pulled in who we needed to implement these projects. And as time moved on, from a personal perspective, I had to sell that business. My stepdaughter got very sick with septicemia, and was in hospital for a 12-month period. And during that, it was obvious that I needed to kind of go back and learn consulting more. It was obvious to me that I really wanted to deepen my knowledge and experience in and amongst that. So that then kicked off 20 years of doing contracting in varying gigs, some big four, private sector, public, some big names, ran the services business for Kier, the construction company, and then CDW, the IT reseller. But I always knew I wanted to build another company. And I did a couple of big roles in government. So did a business transformation for Department for Education, and then led the patient-facing transformation of the NHS. So launched the NHS app. And then I decided it was time to go and build another company. And how this came about was I was going through a divorce. And without going completely off topic, from a financial perspective, I kind of thought, Jesus, it's now or never. So I found it heavily motivating going through a crisis. I did find that motivating. And I'd had a mate for probably 10, 15 years who ran a recruitment business. And this was the business that I'm going to talk about today. And he ran a recruitment business that he assured me was doing 4 million turnover. And I decided to pitch him. And my pitch to him was, give us 50% of the equity of the business, and we will double the turnover of the business, but we'll also triple the margin, so the profitability in the business, and we'll sell it in a 5-year period. And there wasn't a huge amount of science around that, other than I felt very comfortable because I'd been running a lot of these services in government by this time, that we could own those outcomes, deliver these services a lot better than the competition. So I jumped into that business, and almost overnight, we started making moves in way of pivoting from a recruitment company to a consultancy. And that is not a 5-minute job. And it's a fundamental change of the operating model. And so there was a lot of internal work needed around that. And once I kind of lift the lid on that business, it became apparent they weren't doing 4 mil turnover. They were doing 2.9, and it was heading in the wrong direction. He, however, is a convincing salesman, still is actually. So what we did was, I knew it was user-centered design. That was the area that I'd worked in across government. I wanted to build a UCD consultancy, but I wanted us to be the go-to place from a healthcare perspective. We continued, it's important to say this, we continued to have the revenue, the cash flow, for an 18-month period from the recruitment business. We did not turn that off overnight. That would have been catastrophic. So we continued having that, which enabled us to spend time refining our offer, building relationships, networking, getting ourselves out there. But the intention was we wanted to go and win some outcome-based business. And 4 months after I'd landed, we won our first outcome-based piece of work for the NHS. And that piece of work was 154,000. And it was a 16-week discovery. And we threw everything we had into it because we desperately wanted to over-deliver. We wanted to then create some social proof off the back of what we'd done, and we wanted to maximize the backside out of that and start winning more and more business across healthcare. And we did. That was where we moved on to, and we then started picking up more and more contracts, and we were very good at marketing what we were up to, in way of sharing the not what we were doing as a business, but actually sharing the outcomes that we were delivering for our government and healthcare clients. So that business, sorry, Julian, far away, mate.
Oh, just wondered if you could mention sort of how you got that first NHS contract. Was that kind of just pitching an idea through standard funding channels, or were you commissioned?
So the recruitment company, it's called Bluefire at that time. They were on the government frameworks, but they'd not been successful. So they were doing some recruitment into private sector. The fact they were on those frameworks and could supply in meant we were seeing opportunities that were coming through. But what had not happened is there hadn't been a successful, the way government works, you have to do a first stage bid and then a second stage, and then you rock up and present. And apologies if you know this world well. But what hadn't happened is there hadn't been that kind of success on first stage, let alone going through that cycle. So as soon as we saw this requirement, I also happened to know the Chief Digital Officer and the CEO in this part of healthcare, because I'd worked in it for a 10-year period. So the network was really powerful and really helped. The fact we were on the frameworks meant we could move a lot faster, but we had to go through that government process of first stage, second stage, pitch, awarded the contract, and then it kind of moved from there. And every piece of work we won over that entire period of different, so 4.5, 5 years, we had to bid for every piece, and go through that same torturous process. But once we'd got one, it made it easy for us to openly share what we were doing from a case study perspective. And then we picked up additional work with Public Health England. We then started to pick up the next stages on this initial project. So the project that we won was to build the NHS jobs platform. So the platform to hire everybody into the NHS. So it ended up being a 10 million contract for us over 3 years, but it started out 154,000. So, but that move to kind of strategic work really started to drive the change. but it also meant that we could start hiring permanent people in. So this was a recruitment business that had a couple of permanent people when I landed and had a raft of contractors. And over the period of 4.5 years, at the point I sold the business, we had 75 permanent people and about 20 or 30 contractors, and we were ultimately generating 10 million a year in way of that journey. But it was it really kind of snowballed from winning that first outcome, because that kind of put us on the map. And we were very lucky, and we worked bloody hard to make sure that we over-delivered when we were working for a client. So the way that I often describe the team's delivery capability was kind of godlike in way of what we were doing. But we also built a playbook. So we built out something that was reusable in way of how we were approaching this stuff. So we didn't, whether it was contractors or permanent, what we didn't want was to be reinventing the wheel every time we landed. So that kind of delivery journey continued on through the business, and we went through positive stages, but we also had a raft of stuff that didn't go right, and I want to share that as well. As a business, we built a close-knit team in way of who we were, how we were operating. It was often described as a bit of a dysfunctional family, and I think that's quite an apt description. So we all probably knew a lot more about each other than perhaps we should have done. And there's good and bad in that, because it helped as we were going through that early stage, but it actually became harder over a period of time, because I think people were great at working within the team different, but a lot of delivery across government means you've got to work well with others. And that was a challenge at times with some of the team. So I would say that was definitely part of the learning. My other learning, I think they're all people related. Of course they would be. It was a people business. The other learning for me was people who I'd hired right at the start were not necessarily the right people to be in scaling that business as it started to grow. There's different stages with a business. There's kind of, as you hit a dozen up to 30, different stage, 30 to kind of 60, different again. And I think start up to scale up, those different stages often need different skills. And that kind of autocratic top-down approach that we definitely needed right at the start wasn't what we needed as we grew. So there was some challenges around that. And I think the other bit to mention is we actually won some work that, well, we shouldn't have bid for it, if I'm honest. So there's some stuff that we shouldn't have bid for that we did, and we won, and it became a real problem project. And that was learning for me. Not all business is equal in way of not just financial value, but also some of the challenges around delivery. But the bit that I did know with different was that I was always planning to go in, create this consultancy, and then sell it in a 4 or a 5 year period. So right from the off, that was the intention. That was what I pitched to Steve, my old business partner, and that was exactly what we were going to do. And so 2 years into the journey, we had a sell pack written. So we had articulated all of the journey of where we'd come from, what we'd done, how we'd done it. And we had it ready in a data room, and we'd done that deliberately because it was such a tight timeline in way of wanting to, have that concept through the growth and then the sale process. And so a couple of years in, we have the sell pack, and if I cast everybody's mind back to 2019, back end of that year was when everything, the wheels started coming off a little bit in relation to COVID. We were building a lot of services at this time in and around healthcare. So more than 50% of our revenue was in the healthcare space. And as we tipped over into 2020, we'd had an approach at the back end of 2019 from an interested party. And this interested party had acquired a number of businesses in our world. And at that point, we weren't interested, stroke ready. And the reason I say that is I wanted to drive our EBITDA number up over 1 million before we sold. And the reason for that is services businesses tend to be measured on a multiple, and that multiple increases once you go over 1 million from an EBITDA perspective. And at that time, the market was hot. So those multiples were, we're sitting at probably 6 times multiple. But if you went up over 1 million, then you could go closer to an 8 times multiple. So we head into 2020, COVID kicks off. We were very lucky in the respect that we got a phone call. I got a phone call on a Sunday night in May of 2020, and we were asked to build the home testing service for the UK for COVID, the digital service. So we then moved into building services like this remarkably quickly and shipping them back out the door. But that pandemic for us as a business drove an extra 750 grand's worth of business that we weren't planning on. And so what happened during the pandemic, we're building national services for the UK, and I'm also negotiating with 3 potential buyers around the sale of the business. And I was also shielding because I'm very asthmatic. So it was an absolute roller coaster. It was also a very good summer though. So I had a remarkably good tan as well. But there was an awful lot going on during that period. And once we'd had one potential buyer come to the table, we knew we wanted more than one. We wanted to drive that process through. So instructed a lawyer and then moved into a negotiation with these 3 buyers. And the bit for me that was really important was that I wanted to try and map the culture that I created in this dysfunctional family. I wanted to sell to a business that had the same sentiment around culture and around people. And that was deeply important to me in way of finding the right match. And a couple of the companies that approached us, one was a product company, and they wanted us to do a lot of business change work, which just wouldn't have been the right fit for the team. The other one was a very conservative consultancy, and my feeling was they probably wouldn't be the right fit either. So we moved into a heads of terms with a buyer called Panoply at that time, TPX they renamed themselves as, and TPX have probably acquired a dozen companies in and around this space. And because they were a listed company, it was very difficult to be totally open and share all of the information around this transaction with the team. My direct management team were under legal contracts, so they knew what was going on. But the night we did the transaction, I then called every member of the team, permanent staff and contractors, till about 11 o'clock at night, to let them know that we have to wait till the market closes when you sell to a listed business, because if you leak that information, it can have an impact on share price. So the transaction happened, phone calls happened till 11 o'clock at night. Following morning, we're doing an all hands with the new owner of the business, and that then kicked off for me personally an 18-month earnout period. So for 18 months, I was tied into the new business and had some milestones that I had to hit from a revenue perspective, and my sale to them. We had some cash on a day, the day we did the transaction, and then we had other tranches of money coming against milestones over a period of time. And the only other bit to mention about the transaction is that in addition to an 18-month earnout, they also kept me out of the market for 3 years. So I wasn't allowed to work in that industry at all in competition for a 3-year period. Yeah, and we sold for an 8-figure sum, which is in the public domain. And I think we were bloody lucky around the speed at which we went. And, you know, naivety perhaps meant that, you know, my pitch to that business partner meant that we could honour it, because I guess I now know the speed at which we moved was remarkably quick, but we had a lot of things in our favour. You know, we had the trading history. We were on those frameworks. I had a very strong network across government. I'd done some actual transformation in government, and there's lots of people that talk a good game, but not many that have. And we were able to deliver. So what we said we were going to do for clients, we were able to do. And then, you know, if you're a consultancy, building services and healthcare, and that's 50% of your number, and a pandemic lands, in a way, it doesn't get any better because that drove the price of the business up. Ollie, far away.
Yeah. So what led to the Grafter being created?
So what led to the Grafter, so the new company, is I found that whole process really painful, if I'm honest, mate. So I don't believe there are services out there for entrepreneurs to help them grow, scale, or exit a business. And what I mean by that is if you are a very early startup, then you have, sometimes you have the ability to get onto an incubator, and you have some wraparound services. They may take some equity in the business, they may not. And then as the business starts to scale, you will assemble non-exec directors and you will pull on expertise in certain areas. And they may be theorists, but they may also have actually done it themselves. And then as you go through that exit bit, people tend to engage a lawyer in corporate finance. For me personally, what was missing from my lineup was somebody who'd actually been there, seen it, done it. And I wanted somebody who'd felt the emotional drama that I was going through. I was an expert in my business and in the services we provided. But what I did not know is how to sell a business. I didn't know what the earnout process was going to feel like. I didn't have a clue what warranties were and how I would need to underwrite 40 pages of those bloody things. I didn't fully understand that I would be locked out of the market in that way. And my identity was heavily tied to the business. So from an emotional perspective, it felt a bit like selling my baby, if I'm honest. And I did have more than one wobble along that process. So taking all that into consideration, after I sold Different, I wrote a series of about 15 blogs, which kind of talked about my experience, the concept to sale of the business. And then I realized that gap I'd felt myself was what I wanted to close for other founders. So I built a service that initially helped founders to exit their businesses. And over the last couple of years, we have helped a lot of founders in professional services space, healthcare and SaaS to grow their revenue. And so what we've done now is we've expanded the kind of service offering to grow, raise and exit. And it's great crack because entrepreneurs are unique. We are all wired in a slightly odd way. And I say that as a massive positive. And we sit alongside about 10 companies at any one time that are doing 2 to 40 million turnover, and we either help grow their number. We occasionally help them raise money. We did a massive raise last year, 44 million for a client. And then we help them exit if that's what they want to do. So that really that was the motivation. And in between that, Ollie, I had to go and find myself a little bit. So there was a couple of random things that happened after I sold the business. I decided to go off on a psychedelic retreat, which I may or may not be able to talk about. But went off on a bit of a mad one to try and find.
Can you give me the details?
Yeah,
please?
yeah, I'll share those on WhatsApp, mate.
Okay.
It was an amazing and terrifying experience in equal measure. And then we raised a load of money and went into Ukraine to help out on a couple of occasions. And after those 2 adventures, my wife said to me, please just build another business. It's a lot less stressful. So yeah, here I am.
I started writing a book entitled Fuck the Suburbs, and was quickly persuaded by my wife to stop that. It was ridiculous. So yeah, I'm with you fully, Rachel. Lovely story. Any questions for Rachel this morning? Anything that you want to ask her while she's with us this morning? I'm sure there's something out there amongst you guys. Julian.
Wondered if you could expand a little bit on your dysfunctional family.
Very happy to.
What you meant by that. Sounds like there's some sort of positives and negatives. But yeah,
very happy to, Julian, and great question. So I think that for different, it was very gritty. We were heavily invested in making it a success. We all worked very closely, and there was a lot of positives. There was a lot of fun. There was a lot of messing around. And right at the start of the business, that was, what was needed. And everyone kind of mucked in. The difficulties came when the business started getting a bit larger, and it wasn't the original team, and suddenly people had to start working for other people. There was, a bit of a challenge around who was now reporting into me in some cases and into other people. Layers of management have to come in when you're building a business of 100 people. And that definitely caused some challenge. And I think it's also the people that you need right at the start versus the people that you need when you are doing 10 million and a scaled up business are just fundamentally different. And for me, I think there was some learning around recognizing that. And the learning for me on that is, the Grafter is different to that. This business is not a dysfunctional family. It's a high performing team. And it's all about, it's not that we don't have a laugh. We absolutely do. But, I've built this really intentionally around, succession, who can pick up and kind of cover off my stuff going forward. And we're in a very different world as well, Julian, with, the advent of AI being able to actually pick up and cover a number of different functions that wouldn't have been in place before. So, and I think the other fundamental change is that, I wouldn't recommend a consultancy start hiring loads of permanent people today. But that was absolutely the right thing to do when I was building different. But in today's market, I would actively advise against that and say, get a core team of permanent people and bring in the skills that you need as and when you need, because the market's too unstable to be sitting with a very heavy bench cost at the minute, unless you're in a kind of managed service space. And you are writing contracts that are 2, 3, 4 years out. I think the other bit is the world has got a lot smaller since COVID, in a good way, and now being able to access skills internationally, and some of the kind of work ethic in different geographical locations. We've got access to that stuff in a way that we never had before. So for me, it's an exciting time to build a consultancy, but building in today's world for me would look distinctly different to what I built back in 2016.
Thanks, Julian.
Very interesting, yeah.
Rachel, question from me. What was the single biggest thing you learned from the exit?
From the exit, single biggest thing is I was always looking for freedom without getting too emotional. So I was always looking for freedom. And for me, exiting the business has afforded me the ability to have that freedom. That doesn't mean that I'm chilling out on a beach as evidenced, but that's just not my path and it's not my way. I am actually heading to a beach on Saturday, but my backside will be on a lounger for a brief period because I'm pretty wired for action. So that, I think, is the single biggest learning. And how I would break that down if I could have another couple of little ones is my identity was very linked to that company, and I wouldn't do that again. So I've learned that isn't actually that healthy. It's funny, in prepping for today, I was going back through content this morning from different, and it's a bit like an ex-wife now. So you look back with fond memories, but I don't want to relive it. And it's taken time to get to that point. But I think the identity was heavily linked. And my other lesson is I build people businesses. I fucking love people. They are unique. They are crazy. They are dysfunctional, and often drive me mad. But I couldn't imagine a world where I build a business that isn't a people-related business because of all those reasons. And they're really good fun. So for me, it has to be, it has to be fun along the way. And that's absolutely key. Sorry, I sneaked like 3 or 4 in there, Ollie. One was never going to be enough for me.
Well, we'll allow you to do that. Ben.
Rach, you just mentioned 2 things there. So you want to build people businesses, but you also think that AI is going to be something that will maybe reduce the need for people. So do you think there's an opportunity to achieve the same kind of scale and outcome as different or something similar to it while keeping that small core kind of, I mean, you said you're moving away from the whole family thing, but you know what I mean? The small kind of close-knit core team with...
Yeah, I think so, mate. I talked a lot about this week because I'm taking equity in a business not dissimilar to my last one at the minute. And I would really like to see them go on that journey, both the move from recruitment to consultancy, but also leverage what we've got around us right now. It's like, you wouldn't possibly, you just wouldn't not leverage it. It'd be mad. It'd be bonkers. Even the bloody Big Four are getting their act together and leveraging it. So I think that, I think businesses in the future in this world are going to look like a lot less permanent people, and they should, and fractional skills as and when you need them, true expertise. And I think a raft of it is going to be powered by automation. And a lot of the tasks that drive me mental, my PA was away recently for a week, and I'm thinking, why is there a 4-step process to get a fucking contract signed off? And it's things like that where it's like, there isn't. It's completely inefficient. So it's time to, really leverage some of those bits and just make that, tighten it all up. But I think I think you can have a lot of fun with a team of 6, a team of 12. And maybe there's a vanity thing, and there probably was for different, in way of the number of permanent staff, but also that was the right model at that time. We went into it knowing that, at that point, the margins, the salaries, everything was different. If I think about it, we had permanent developers, senior devs that were 45k when I started the business in Newcastle. As I sold the business, they were pulling a 6-figure sum. So it just fundamentally shifted and changed. But I do think that I think AI, not just AI is buzzword for bloody everything at the minute, but I think some of the machine learning, I think leveraging data, building systems is going to help us build these businesses, micro businesses, spinning out from the solopreneur to the micro, really successfully and deliver great outcomes for clients. So yeah, I definitely think so. But there'll be a few casualties along the way, I'm sure.
Thanks, Ben. Neil.
Yeah, no, fantastic talk, Rachel. Apologies, I missed a little bit of the start. I had a call from the school. My son's not feeling the best, so I might have missed an important bit. I am probably a crazy and dysfunctional person that's worked in corporate because I am a designer and a UCD designer.
Lovely. You're immediately comfortable for me then, Neil.
Indeed. So I'd love to reach out. I had a question about the AI, and it's related to what Ben was saying. I get a little bit frustrated with the rhetoric that AI is going to replace people, because I don't believe it does. I think it will just enable people to do things that people are better at rather than administrative tasks. That's a leading question, but I was wondering what your perspective on that, given your experience.
So I don't think that AI is going to replace people today. I think but I will caveat that as today. I think it will over time in certain roles and functions. But I think that it will augment, it will improve. At the minute, if you're not using it, you're missing out on a competitive advantage. It is not the be all and end all. There is so much of it that is shite. And not correct. So it's a bit like, sorry, I didn't realise if I could swear on this session, Ollie, but I've gone large repeatedly. So, good lad. But I think that ultimately it is like having access to a researcher for all of us, but we shouldn't trust, like you wouldn't with a junior researcher. Yeah, it's like a junior member of the team, but you wouldn't trust everything that they rock up with and go, that's golden. It needs to be tested. It needs to be seen as a data source alongside others, is probably how I would summarize it. I have never seen myself as interested in a piece of technology as I appear to be with AI, but also I have a very addictive nature. So I kind of know, for me, I have a play with it and then I have to put it back down. I don't want to feel like I'm dating the bloody AI. And I, unfortunately, can get a bit hooked into these things. But on a daily basis, it's improving. And that's the bit that kind of blows my mind. So it's moving so sodding quick. I was presenting earlier this week and I said, what we do at the start of a quarter around lead gen is now different at the end of the quarter, because we're testing not just AI, we're testing different tools and different propositions. So what I'm saying is it's moving really quick. But I don't think today, Neil, it is replacing. I think it enhances, it improves, it gives you another perspective, but it's not right a lot of the time. It's my summary of the situation right now. But I was asked this question last night. God, I couldn't predict, where we will be in 12 months with it. But it will be mind-blowing.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. Peter.
Hi, Rachel. Very fascinating story, and some good lessons for us all to learn in that, really. especially somebody who's gone through the process. It's really good. What I was interested in is, what are your thoughts on working in with business in Ukraine? As you mentioned, Ukraine.
So I've done a reasonable amount of work with people who are based in Ukraine from a development perspective. Well, I'll give you a totally honest answer. So I sat on the board of a healthcare company called Careology for a number of years, and their dev teams are based between Ukraine and Israel. Not exactly calm locations. So it caused challenges in way of being in active war zones, frankly, with connectivity, with the need for generators, and the stuff that needed to happen at exactly the time it needed to happen was often challenging, which of course it would be under those circumstances. However, I think the work ethic from the Ukrainian people I've worked with is exceptional. And without wanting to slate the UK, I would say it's probably an uptick against what I would normally see from a UK perspective. So my personal view, and the other element I must say, is from a human perspective, create an opportunity for people who are trying to live and work under those bloody circumstances should be a consideration for all of us. So that would be my take. But yeah, high technical capability, very high. Does that answer your question, Peter?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I'm familiar with the Israeli end. I've got relatives over there, and I was over there last December, and we're actually going again in August. And I've met with lots of business people over there. I did a big presentation at Caesarea in 2012. Was I was the only international participant at the time. But I find that the Israelis are very good to work with. They're very they get on with things. And I get the impression of the Ukrainians as well. So I can see where there's synergy between the two to work with that. But no, thank you very much for that.
Yeah, no worries. I have to say the technical capability of the Israeli team was probably, cost-wise, they probably would have averaged about time and a half the cost of the UK, possibly slightly more. But technical capability, innovation in particular, felt very strong for me. Some really, really clever thinking, and yeah, I mean, work ethic is probably one of my favourite subjects at the minute. But I don't want to do too much UK bashing, Peter. So I must pause at that point.
Thank you very much, Peter. Fantastic session, Rachel. We thank you a lot, and you're welcome back anytime. You, over the next few days, are going to get some big love, big shout outs, big ups, whatever you want to call them, on LinkedIn and various other media platforms. And soak it all up, please, Rachel, because that was really good. And anyone, are we okay to distribute the slides and put it on?
Of course, mate, of course. And if anyone's
platform?
got any other questions, do reach out. Really happy to answer questions, have a chat.
As a fellow multi-exited founder like yourself, Rachel, it's good to listen to your story and hear the sort of upsides and downsides of what you went through and the why behind the Grafter. I think that's a really important lesson for anyone. So that was fabulous. Everyone have a great weekend. I think the weather's going to be with us. You have a great holiday, Rachel.
Will do.
And we'll see everyone soon.
Real nice to meet everyone. Thanks, Ollie. Have a good Friday.
Have a fabulous weekend.